Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou, coming to you on this Sunday morning, the morning after what was a really, really disappointing Arsenal, I'm going to say, performance and defeat. I know there'll be a few people out there that will say, no, the performance wasn't that bad, and on another day we could have won the game. I think there was so much wrong with Arsenal's display yesterday. There was so much wrong with some of the decisions that were taken. I'm not sure that all the things I'm going to moan about could have been avoided given some of the fitness issues that we have. So I'd like to put that little caveat in right at the start. Look, this is a team that's just been on an 18-game unbeaten run. So if you think I'm going to sit here and rip them a new one and start questioning whether, we've taken any step forward this season, whether we're going to win anything, whether the manager's the right guy, whether certain signings were the right signings, if you think I'm going to do that, I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you. That's not what we're going to do today. We are going to react to an incredibly frustrating game that provided an incredibly frustrating outcome. And we're going to try and explore why and how we ended up leaving Aston Villa yesterday, Villa Park, completely empty-handed. That's what we're going to do on today's pod. Big hello to everybody who's joining us live at the moment, because I can see that there are plenty of you with us in the live chat, which is great to see. And I know Sunday mornings are not an ideal time to be streaming live, but look, here we are. I feel like, normally we go live at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. UK time. We've gone live a little bit later this time, nearly an hour later. Do you know why? Because I got up this morning and I just did not have that same enthusiasm that I do after a victory or after a good performance to kind of get up, get ready, get going, get down to my office and sit and record this pod. I've sort of been going back and forth with myself on certain topics and debates, and I'm kind of going to do that out loud during this pod. And I'd love you guys' input as well in the live chat. Of course, I always do. I've been going back and forward with a few things. I actually considered, because I was so bothered and frustrated by this game yesterday, I actually considered recording this pod last night. And then I sort of started jotting down a few notes, and I thought to myself, no, because I'm going to be too reactionary. And I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that guy that sits and rants without really thinking or allowing myself the time to process what I've just witnessed. There's a lot of things we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about the initial team selection. We're going to talk about some of the combinations that clearly did not work, some of the relationships that are clearly not where they need to be if Arsenal are going to go on and win this Premier League title. We need to talk about some of the below par individual performances, because there were a fair few yesterday. We need to talk about tactically what it was that we couldn't live with, because let's be honest about it, Aston Villa had a lot of chances over the course of the game. You think about the first half, there was, the Ollie Watkins chance when he sort of chopped and changed direction inside the box and managed to get the shot off. Excellent save by Raya. There was Matty Cash on the right-hand side when his effort was charged down by Declan Rice. There was Matty Cash for the goal. There was the Donyell Marlin one that flew just wide of the post. There was the cross into the box that Jurrien Timber so nearly diverted into the back of his own net. There were so many good moments for Aston Villa. And it's not that I don't expect that, but you need to be replying, right? You think about Arsenal's chances. You think about what we created. What did we create really that was clear cut apart from the goal? We had shots, speculative efforts from the edge of the box, some really easy routine saves from Emi Martinez. And the thing that I think has irked me the most and bothered me the most about what we saw yesterday is that we keep talking about injuries. And yes, our back line is riddled with them. And I know in the front line, we're not in perfect shape, because there's still players that, in my view, should have started, but obviously maybe couldn't because of their fitness and where they're at. But we've still got more in attack than we've got defensively right now. And it feels like we've lost control at the back for obvious reasons, but we've also we're just not producing and creating enough as an attacking unit. And, we're going to talk about the schedule. I know people have gone really, really big on that in recent times. We'll get into maybe what should have happened now with hindsight over the course of this difficult period. But Aston Villa played in midweek as well, and they were full of beans. So there comes a point where, you can bemoan that and you can talk about it and you can say that it's not right and that football is heading in a very difficult direction as a result of that. But ultimately, everyone's having to deal with that. Everyone's having to contend with that. I know Villa are in the Europa League, so, they're not playing the same level of opposition when a lot of their midweek fixtures come around. But Aston Villa are not Arsenal. Aston Villa don't have the depth or the squad or the budget that Arsenal do. So, there's a lot to unpack here. And listen, I'm wary of crossing the line a little bit in terms of my criticism today, but I can only go by how I feel today. Will I feel differently tomorrow? Will the dust settle a little bit if we go and win in Europe on sort of Wednesday? Will I sort of calm down a little bit and then look ahead to some of the games we've got coming up? Do you know what scares me right now? The fact that we've got to play Aston Villa again before the year is out, or around about that time, within the next few weeks, because they seem to have our number. They seem to have our number. I was talking about it yesterday with David Hillier. We did the commentary on the game for Arsenal TV. I cannot tell you how difficult it was to try and remain professional as Emi Buendia smashed it into the back of the net on 95 minutes. It's difficult when it's your team. It's difficult when you're emotionally invested. I think I did an okay job at sort of, conveying the moment, because as a commentator, that's what you got to do. But it was hard, man. It was hard. And the minute I wrapped up at the end of the game and said the final score, I just sort of slammed my headphones down on the table and thought, for F's sake, here we go. Let's start with the team selection, shall we? I think that's a good place to start breaking this one down. I'm just having a look at the Arsenal team, just making sure that I don't miss anything out. So look, in terms of the way we started the game, shall I bring it up on the screen? I think I can do that. Let's do it. Hold on. Share screen. This is the format we want. Share screen. Where are we? There you go. Okay. So this was the team that started the game for Arsenal. So David Raya in goal, as expected. White continued at right back after a good display in midweek against Brentford. Jurien Timber played at right centre-back alongside Piero Hincapié. We haven't really got much choice in that position right now because there's no William Saliba. I was really disappointed, by the way, not to see him with the group and in the squad, because we've been told that it's just a matter of days, yet he's still nowhere to be seen. So there's going to be concern and panic around him. Piero Hincapié continued at left centre-back as expected. Again, we are short of options there. And Ricardo Calafiori, having successfully avoided that yellow card in midweek, making him available for today's game, played at left back and, of course, picked up a yellow card in this game. Standard Ricardo Calafiori. Moving into the midfield, Zubimendi, Rice and Odegaard were the three, with Saka playing from the right, Eza playing from the left, and Marino up front. Now, when you look at Arsenal's substitutes bench, I thought, okay, there's options here. Victor Gyökeres is there, Noni Madueke's there, Gabriel Martinelli's there, Ethan Nwaneri's there, Leandro Trossard's there. If you are looking to change the game from an attacking perspective, little bit short defensively, Lewis Skelly obviously can come in and play on that left side. If you needed to move one of Ben White and Calafiori into centre-back, you could do that if that was necessary. And young Marley Salmon was on the bench. Look, he's a really, really exciting young player. Great to see him get the opportunity to be on the bench for a game like this. But the fact that a 16-year-old is on the bench in a Premier League game kind of shines a light on where we're at in terms of injuries and options in that area of the pitch right now. So let's talk a little bit about what Mikel might have and maybe could have done differently. First of all, you look at the defense. I don't think there's much he can do there, to be honest with you. Like, do you push Calafiori in to left centre-back and then play Miles Lewis-Skelly at left-back? Some people might argue you could have done that. I don't think Hincapié deserved to be dropped. And I think, again, you're in a situation when you start doing that you're weakening your team in multiple areas rather than just trying to plug one hole, you start to take away from other positions. And I don't always think that's the right thing to do. White and Timber, the kind of way they were deployed. I mean, White played well at right back the other day. I don't like Jurien Timber at centre back. I'm sorry, I don't. I think he's an excellent 1v1 defender. I think he's shown himself to be one of the best right backs in the game right now in recent times. I understand that he played as a centre back for Ajax in the past, and that it's a position that isn't, of course, completely alien to him. But he does not have the height or the physical stature to play as a centre half in the Premier League for me. I'm sorry. I don't think that's why we lost the game, by the way. And so please don't take it as though I'm pointing the finger at Jurien Timber. But I just don't like that dynamic. I don't like the kind of big man on the outside and the smaller man on the inside. I just don't think that works. And then you look at Nkapie, who isn't massive either, and you end up with quite a weak central defensive pairing in terms of what they can cope with aerially. Now, thankfully for us, that wasn't the way that Aston Villa approached the game. But, you know, people will look at that. If we have to continue with these two guys at centre-back, people will identify that as a weakness and as a chink in our armour, and we're going to have problems there. Then you move into the midfield. Odegaard, Zubimendi and Rice. Look, I am not going to go too big on the decision to start these three in the midfield, because at the start of the season, most people would have told you that's our best midfield trio. That's the midfield trio that we're going to go with. There'll be a bit of rotation here and there, but that's the midfield trio that we're going to go with. For me, it was clear that some of those combinations didn't work, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. And then the forward line, Mikel Merino up front. Now, I can only assume that Victor Gyökeres was not fit enough to start, because as we discussed in the lead up to this game, and as we discussed post Brentford, this was a game for Victor Gyökeres. Aston Villa do not sit in a low block at all times. Did they revert to that in certain scenarios and situations when Arsenal had a lot of the ball? Yeah, of course, as most teams would. But that's not their game. You need runners. You need people that are going to turn them around and have them running back towards their own goal. That's what Victor Gyökeres does. I can only, as I say, assume that he was not fit enough to start this game. But then you can make the argument, if he comes on at half time, that you start him, you try and get yourselves in a good position. And then as the game develops, if you see that he's running out of gas, you hook him, you make the change, you make the adjustment. But Mikel, for whatever reason, went with Merino. Saka, shoe-in on the right-hand side, always going to play. Left-hand side, Eberechi Eze. I am someone that has often said that I don't mind Eze playing from the left-hand side. I've defended that idea plenty because I feel in certain games where there isn't going to be that much in terms of his defensive requirements, he might get a little bit more involved playing from the left, as long as he's got that license to drift in field and get on the ball and get into those half spaces and into those more central areas where we know he does his damage. But this was a game where you needed defensive solidity. You needed a left winger on this day who would follow Matty Cash, who would run back with him, who would be switched on defensively, and who had the energy to get up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And you know what? This was the game. If Leandro Trossard couldn't start, which he clearly couldn't because he couldn't even complete the 45 minutes in the second half. If Leandro Trossard could not start, Gabriel Martinelli needed to start on the left wing yesterday at Villa Park. Absolutely 100% needed to. I don't understand the decision for this game. I'm not ruling out Eze playing from the left ever. I'm not saying that Eze cannot play there at all and should never be considered in that part of the pitch. But for this game, that was the wrong call. It was the wrong call. So I go back to what I was saying about certain combinations, certain partnerships that just did not work on the day. And there's a few of them. Odegaard and Zubimendi, both trying to do the same thing all the time. Odegaard repeatedly dropping into those deeper areas to try and get on the ball, to try and dictate play, to try and set the tempo. Zubimendi's supposed to do that. That's what Zubimendi was brought into the club to do, to get on the ball from deep and work it through the lines. Now, you could argue, and maybe this was the thinking, that Martin Zubimendi was expected to do that. Villa were always going to try and make his life difficult. They were going to put a player on him. They were going to try and shut that down. And that meant that someone else had to step in. And Zubimendi was almost kind of sacrificing himself at times and having to vacate that space so that someone would go with him. And that would leave the hole for Odegaard or whoever to drop in and get on the ball and try and do that. But one of the things that has been good about Arsenal over the last few years is that when Odegaard plays, when Saka plays, when whoever else plays in that forward line, and we're in possession, our midfielders step forward and we end up with almost a kind of five-pronged attack. And the then deeper lying midfield player has got options. You keep talking about that player needing to work it through the lines. Well, they need options to do that. And if Odegaard drops deep and Zubimendi's gone right or left to pull the Aston Villa midfielder out with him, then we've got one less option in that area. And it becomes very, very difficult for whoever's picking the ball up in that area to try and work it through the lines and get us going, get us turning, get us moving. It just didn't work. Both of them were trying to do the same thing. And I felt that Zubimendi was completely redundant at Villa Park yesterday. You can blame that on the setup. You can blame that on what Odegaard was doing. It's up to you. I'm not really sure what I think exactly the reason for that was. But Zubimendi was redundant. He wasn't winning duels. He wasn't winning the ball back. He wasn't providing the defensive screen that we needed in front of the weaker back four. He wasn't getting on the ball. He wasn't working it through the lines. He was completely redundant for me yesterday. Completely redundant. Declan Rice did not have the energy to dominate and to control in the middle of the park the way he normally does. Can you blame him? He's been running to the ground. He was a doubt going into this game, but he made it. He was never going to be at his best. So you needed other people around him to step up and take on that mantle, and nobody did. Nobody did. You move into the forward line. Marino and Eza can work. We've seen that in recent weeks, but it works when Marino is playing with his back to goal. We're feeding the ball into him, and he's either laying it off first time to someone like Eberechi Eza, who's already in a central position, which means he can get to him nice and quickly, or when Marino drops into those deep pockets and vacates the space for a central runner to break into. That's when it's worked with Marino and Eze. The dynamic and the picture for both of them was completely different yesterday. And again, I go back to the team selection, and I will say this. I have to say this in the interest of fairness. The players that I probably would have put in or was hoping to see in the starting 11, two mainly in Gyökeres and Trossard, we don't know how fit they are. Trossard couldn't even complete 45, so I can forgive that one. Gyökeres, I don't think, could have completed more than 45 either, because he looked dead on his feet by the time the game ended. But maybe you were better off starting with him and changing it as the game went on. Too many players trying to do the same things. Too many players not at it on an individual level. Too many players not at it physically. I'm really disappointed in that, because, yeah, we can talk about the schedule, and we will talk about the schedule. We talk about it every damn week. But at the end of the day, Aston Villa played in midweek as well. And they played a really difficult game away at Brighton. It was a far more taxing affair than the one that we played at home to Brentford. And they didn't really make changes. They made one change. Tielemans came in. That was it. That midfield trio of Kamara, Onana, and Tielemans completely bossed us off the ball. We couldn't get to second balls. We couldn't get a stranglehold on the game for any sustained period, because we didn't have the energy when the ball was turned over to win it back quickly and to suffocate in the way that we normally do. We did it for a brief period at the start of the second half, and I really did think at that point, once we equalized, that we were going to go on and win the game. But it became clear and it became apparent as the game went on that we didn't have enough in the tank to do that. And so you need to shut up shop, and you need to close it down and make sure that you continue the unbeaten run, which breeds a confidence within the camp, and that you ensure you take at least a point, so that when Manchester City went on and won later on in the day, which was always going to happen at home to Sunderland, they were only eating into your lead by 2 points and not by 3. The whole complexion of the title race changed yesterday. And I've said for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, I don't want to be that guy that's super overreactionary, but I've said for weeks and weeks and weeks that this thing is not over. Do not get carried away. Do not sleep on Manchester City, because we'll pay for it if we do. And yes, injuries are a problem. Fatigue is a problem. But wasn't this squad assembled to deal with that? And yes, we've got an unprecedented amount of injuries at the back. And I can forgive us being a little bit less dominant and a little bit less controlling in the defensive third than we normally are. But we're also not producing enough at the other end of the pitch as well. We certainly didn't yesterday. We certainly didn't at Chelsea. That is fair to say. If we have a look at some of the match stats, I think this makes really, really interesting reading. That we just about, controlled possession. Well, I'm not going to say controlled. 53 to 47% is not controlling. We just about edged it in that front. XG. When was the last time that Mikel Arteta's Arsenal conceded an XG of 2.27? Now, our XG wasn't too bad, 1.92. We managed 15 shots. They had 15 too. We managed 9 on target. They had 6 on target. But another stat that really jumps out at me is this: total touches inside the opposition box. Aston Villa 43, Arsenal 32. When was the last time a team, I'd love someone to go back and look this up. When was the last time that an opposition had 43 touches inside Arsenal's box? But again, I can understand that the defense is not what it normally is, because we've got 2 of the best central defenders in world football missing right now. And the guy that's come in the summer and been such an able deputy in Christian Mosquera, he's going to be out now for 6 weeks or so. So I can understand that. But these problems that we had yesterday against Aston Villa, they're not exclusive to the back line. It's because we couldn't control the midfield. It's because we didn't look after the ball well enough at times. It's because we weren't streetwise enough at certain points. There's a whole number of reasons as to why Arsenal played the way that they did yesterday, and why we ended up, in the end, I think, getting exactly what we deserved, which was nothing. Nothing. We'll come on to talk about some individual performances in just a moment. We're going to take a really, really short pause. You are listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's do that now. We'll be back in a few seconds and we'll continue working our way through this game. I hope the therapy's helping. We'll come on to your thoughts and questions as the show goes on. Do not worry.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Make sure, if you haven't done so already, that you like and subscribe if you're with us on YouTube. If you are with us via Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review, because that really, really does help. And if you want to go one further, you can become a Chronicles of a Gooner patron. It's patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below. A massive thank you to those of you that have signed up over the last few days. We've had a new wave of members. So a big thank you to all of you guys. Remember to join the Discord server as well. If you're new and you signed up in the last couple of days, I will make sure that I send out the link again, because I know that some of you have joined after I sent that message, so you won't have access to it via the Patreon platform. I'll be sure to do that today. And we've got a Patreon episode coming out a little bit later on in the day as well. It might be early evening by the time I get it out, because I've got some dad duties to do today. But yeah, there is a Patreon episode on its way as well. And that's going to focus on the Eze Odegaard dilemma, because I do think there is a bit of a dilemma there, and Mikel Arteta's got to figure out how to go about addressing it and fixing it, because and maybe the focus should be on Odegaard, not because I want to pick on him. He's our captain. I love him. I think he's excellent. I think he's got so much to offer. I don't think, by the way, his performance yesterday was amazing, but I don't think it was as bad as some people made it out to be when I was reading some of the reaction to the game online after I got home. But I think Odegaard is currently giving us a bit of a dilemma with 2 players, not just one. It's not just about how you get him and Eze in the team, or if you can do that at all. I think there was a lot of crossover with Odegaard and Eze and Zubimendi, I beg your pardon, yesterday, which also I think is probably a cause for concern. let's talk about some of the individual performances. Ødegaard is someone I've just touched on. Let's kind of continue with the Norwegian. I think he looked really, really busy, but he just was not productive enough with the amount of possession that he had. Eberici Eze on the day offered absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing in an attacking sense. Nothing in terms of getting on the ball and making things happen. Zero control. Not enough defensive work. Switched off for the Aston Villa goal badly. And the annoying thing about that for me was that if you watch the game back, which I've done this morning, shortly before they score that goal, they have that moment where they come down the left-hand side, they deliver a ball across the penalty area, and it breaks to Matty Cash, and it's Declan Rice who gets back on the cover and makes this wonderful block to deny Cash. Cash has smelt blood then. Even though he does not get on the, he does not get the shot off because it's blocked. Even though Declan Rice does well to work back, he's looked at that and he's gone, there's a gap here. Eze's not going to come with me. And so he makes that run again and he scores the goal from it. He scores the goal from it. So, that was a problem. And Eze was largely responsible there for me. Lewis Martin on my glasses. I hope those plastic glasses were £1. I can assure you they were way more expensive than that, mate. Do you want me to buy you a pair? Anyway, let's move on. Lots of comments about the midfield and that balance and that dynamic, and we'll get onto all of that stuff in a little bit. Mikel Merino, another one, totally ineffective, or ineffective, I should say. Never really influenced the game in any way, shape, or form. Had the opportunity early on a couple of times to play passes in for runners that had gone beyond him, and it just did not materialize. The quality was not there. Maybe that was tiredness. I don't know. Calafiori, I never felt comfortable watching him defend yesterday against John McGinn, and I'm going to come on to talk about a tactical element of the game that I thought was really interesting, and it certainly affected Calafiori's game. And Declan Rice shattered, half fit and unable to dominate, as I've already mentioned, in the way that he normally does. Tactically, I thought Unai Emery got us. I think Unai Emery obviously follows Mikel Arteta's career, because I'm sure that when you manage a football club, it doesn't go your way. You then look at that club as time goes on, and you're basically more interested in how that club get on than you would be in any other club, right? I think what we saw tactically from Aston Villa was not a new thing. It wasn't something that they designed to cause us problems. It's something they actually do a lot. And I was speaking to a Villa fan, Dan Bardell, on the pod just the other day, and he actually mentioned the way that McGinn and Rodgers play their roles. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So if you have a look at the Villa team on paper, let me just bring it up on the screen. What you'll see it's a back four, and then you've got the two holding midfield players, Camara and Onana, which gave them the control that we just didn't have. Then you've got McGinn, looks like he's playing from the right. Rodgers looks like he's playing from the left, with Tielemans in between them. But what's really interesting about the way that Rodgers and McGinn play those roles, McGinn is as left-footed as they come. He's always going to want to come inside. Rodgers likes to come inside as well. That's where he does his best work. But what those guys do is they move out. When Villa win the ball back, they move into wide areas, right, straight away. They do almost the Pep Guardiola, where they pull all the way out to the touchline as wide as possible so that there's space for them to receive the ball. And Villa's thought is always, how can I get it into them nice and early? And that's what they like to do. Now, in doing that, they either pull the opposition defense apart, which gives Ollie Watkins channels and corridors to run into, and that means you can pick him out, or they have plenty, as I say, of space and time to receive the ball. And they're both good players, and they can both make things happen. We really struggled with those John McGinn and sort of Morgan Rodgers movements. Our fullbacks didn't know whether to go with them, whether to tuck in. At times, our centre backs were being dragged over to try and help and double up, which was creating space for Watkins, which was creating space for Tielemans to run into from slightly deeper. We even saw Onana venture forward at points, and the same with Camara. Okay, they did a really good job of stretching an Arsenal backline that normally you can't stretch, normally has the capacity to deal with big spaces, but with the absences that we currently have, we just don't. And Aston Villa benefited from that. Credit to Camara and Onana. They were everywhere in the middle of the park. They made life incredibly difficult for us. They got back, they plugged holes when we were in possession, but they also had the energy to then turn us around and start running towards our goal. And putting us on the back foot really, really quickly. We can talk about the schedule, and I've touched on it already. I will hold my hands up and say that when we were going into the game with Bayern, right? When we went into the game with Bayern, I was like, before the game, I was like, oh, what do we do here? I think we probably got to prioritize. I think that, to expect Arsenal with all the injury problems that we have to maintain this level in this intensity of fixture over and over again is a problem, right? I didn't think that we'd be able to do it. As the Bayern Munich game came around, I fell into the trap of thinking, no, you know what? It's Bayern Munich at the Emirates. Momentum is more important than physical condition right now, etc., etc. Let's go out swinging against Bayern. And we went out swinging against Bayern, picked a really good team, beat them comprehensively, really good result, huge confidence boost. We all enjoyed it. But what I should have been more switched on to, and what I think Mikel Arteta should have been more switched on to, and this is obviously hindsight analysis, and I appreciate that, was the fact that that was a step too far. And in the short term, we might have benefited from that confidence boost and that feel-good feeling. But at the same time, there was a good chance that we were going to pay for it down the line. Now, if we had Brentford, Burnley and Wolves as our upcoming games, then you go different story. But we didn't. We went to Chelsea after the Bayern game and we looked knackered as that game went on. And we were so knackered that we didn't have what was necessary to take advantage of the man advantage that we had and put Chelsea to bed and win it. Okay. Then we play Brentford. Brentford, we get through in second gear. Okay. That's the reality. We made a few changes, freshened it up in a few instances. And then we go to Aston Villa. We go to Aston Villa, and again, common theme, we're dead on our feet. We've run out of energy when it really, really matters. But even still, we should have had the know-how, the nous, and someone should have been taking ownership and insisting that at 1-1, after the 80th minute, when it became apparent and clear to everybody that Arsenal had nothing left in the tank, somebody should have taken a hold of the game and gone, just don't lose this, boys. Shut it down. Okay, let's shut it down and let's just make sure that we do not get beat here. Okay, it's not our day. We've got lots of issues. We haven't got the players available to us that we need. Let's just make sure that we stay in the fight. Okay, and what do? We start trying to be expansive. We start opening up big spaces that we just did not have the energy on the day to deal with. And one of the things that I've been so impressed with when it comes to Arsenal this season, generally speaking, is that naivety. It feels like we've got past that, but you saw it all on display again yesterday. And that's why I'm so frustrated and upset about the result at Villa Park. You get beat at Villa Park because Morgan Rogers shifts the ball out of his feet from 30 yards out and fires one into the top corner. You say, fair enough. And I felt that way after the Liverpool game. Did I have regrets? Liverpool away, did I think we could have been a bit more aggressive? We said all of that at the time. But in the cold light of day, when you sort of looked back on it, you went, Dominic Szoboszlai has pulled an absolute worldie out of the bag. And, that's ultimately what's won the game. And it's a goal that's worthy of winning a game. And you just take it on the chin and you move on. This wasn't that. This was a series of bad decisions because we were so desperate to try and win the game. And there'll be people out there screaming back at this and going, hold on a minute. Haven't we been banging on about winner mentality? Aren't we winners? Isn't that what we want to be? Of course we should have been going and winning that game. No, because the Premier League title race, guys, it is a marathon and not a sprint. And you'd have thought that we'd have learned that in recent years, given the way it's gone for us. On 80 minutes, I said to myself, and this is no word of a lie, just get out of there with the point. So then we break down how that goal comes around, how that goal comes about. There's a long ball forward initially. There is the most weak attempt at a clearance from Martin Zubimendi I've ever seen in my life. Ball goes beyond him. Then the ball goes in behind and Piero Hincapié comes across and cleans up. Okay, cleans up. And then he carries the ball out towards the right touchline. Now, Hincapié is on his weaker side coming across that direction. And I'm thinking to myself, just smash it up the pitch. Smash it up the pitch. But he doesn't. Do you know why he doesn't? Because he's desperate for us to win the game. So he's trying to find a better option. He's trying to work it forward into someone. He feels like he can make a difference. And for a minute, the idea of ball playing from the back takes over what you should actually be doing in that moment in time, which is thinking about safety first. And that goes back to the whole attitude of the team with regards to whether or not we should have just accepted that we could get out there with a point and take that and move on, or whether we needed to win. So he takes it out of play because he's hesitant. He doesn't know what he's going to do there. Gets caught in two minds, ends up doing nothing. Ball goes out of play, quick throw in. And it's from that series of events that the goal comes about. And we had multiple opportunities to clear our lines. I think I said it in the commentary. If you go on Arsenal.com, you can watch the whole game back. Myself and David Hillier were on commentary. If you don't want to do that, if it's too painful, I completely understand. You can watch the extended highlights. There's a 10-minute highlight package. And I say, as that move is transpiring, Arsenal have failed to clear their lines because there were multiple opportunities to do that, and we just didn't take them. And Villa score. Villa score, and when you look at the stats that we touched on earlier on, I'll just sort of revisit those. 2.27 in terms of their XG, 15 attempts at our goal. They forced David Raya into some really good saves. They were good value for it. I'm not saying they were miles and miles and miles better than us. They weren't, but they were good value for something from the game. They were going to get something. They were going to get a point. In the end, they managed to turn that into 3 points. At 1-1, I thought we were going to go on and win it. But by about 80 minutes, as I said, it was clear we were struggling. And we needed to be smart, and we needed to shut the game down. And that comes from the sidelines as much as it comes from the players on the pitch. I know we created a chance, didn't we, in stoppage time, where Declan Rice came down the left wing and he flashed the ball across the box. And Noni Madueke couldn't quite wrap his foot around it. And he ended up hitting the side netting. And people will view that as an opportunity to go and win the game. At that point, when we're clearly struggling, do I want the one midfielder in our team that is capable of offering some actual protection, physical protection to our backline? Do I want him marauding down the left-hand side? Probably not. If we score from it, I'm saying something very, very different. Granted, that's the benefit we have when we do this analysis. We can do it with hindsight. That's why sometimes people say, you're not harsh enough, or you're not this, or you're not that. That's because I appreciate and I understand the position I'm doing this from. I'm sitting in my office being a hindsight merchant. The managers don't have the luxury of being that. So that's why I'm happy to criticize, but I'm not going to stick the boot in, as I said, right at the top of the show, too hard on a team that have gone 18 games unbeaten with all the issues that we've had and with the fixture list that we've had. Okay? Context is important. Perspective is important. Sometimes you need to zoom out to find that perspective. But at the same time, I can be very upset with what I saw yesterday. And believe me, I am. I'd imagine that's coming across in my tone. But I go back to that point about maybe potentially sacrificing the Bayern game or making the changes in the Bayern game. Now, those who had paid a fortune to get to the game would not have been happy with that. But in the bigger picture, maybe that was the right thing to do, because we have dropped points since then, largely because we've run out of gas. Not because we've been outplayed, because we've run out of gas. And Pep Guardiola, who's been down this course a ton of times, who's won this Premier League multiple times, who's won this Premier League as many times as Mikel Arteta and many, many other managers in world football can only dream of. What did he do? What did he do? When they played Champions League in the week, he made changes. They lost the game. They're still going to get through in the Champions League, but then they went and got the results that were necessary to put a dent in Arsenal's lead. And Pep Guardiola will probably turn around now and say that with hindsight, yes, I lost in the Champions League because I made those changes. But during that period of time, I have managed to eat into Arsenal's lead, and their lead only stands now at 2 points. With Arsenal, by the way, having to go to the Etihad still this season. Now, I know Arsenal have played a lot of difficult away games, many of which Manchester City still have to play. But my point is that Pep Guardiola made that sacrifice, and he's been rewarded for making that sacrifice because they have eaten into our lead. And we should have had at least 2 more points on the board over the course of the Chelsea and Villa game than we did. And if that happens, then they've eaten into our lead by a point. But instead, they've eaten into it by 3 points. Now it's down to 2. And it is very much squeaky bum time, even 15 games into the season. So that's why there's a frustration. That's why there's a disappointment. That's why I'm feeling the way that I do today. Right, that's kind of it from me in terms of my monologue. Let's take another really, really brief pause. And when we come back, I want to hear from you guys in the chat. I want your questions. I want your thoughts. And we'll continue the therapy session for a little while longer. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner pod with me, Harry Symeou. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You heard the kid. If you're with us on YouTube, make sure you leave a like on the video. Make sure you hype the video as well. If you're watching this back, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I really, really appreciate that. We're closing in. We're not far away from 47,000. So let's try and get there on YouTube. On the audio front, big thank you to all of you guys that continuously support the pod. Believe me, your support does not go unnoticed. I'd still say we probably have a slightly bigger audience on the audio front than we do on the YouTube channel, which is remarkable, really, when you think about it. But why not subscribe to both? That way you get the visuals, and when we do tactical things, that's really, really helpful, I think. Also, you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. You can sign up for less than the price of a cup of coffee. That's how much it costs per month. But with that, you are supporting the podcast. You're helping me keep the lights on. You're helping me as a freelancer, as I always say, to dedicate more time to the show. Plus, you get access to bonus content, the next piece of which is going to drop later today. You get access to our Discord server, and you can access every single pod that we do completely ad-free. So, yeah, check it out. Right, let's go into the chat box and see what you guys are thinking. What do we got? Let's take this one from Tony Fulbrook. He says, Harry, you do know that City just beat Fulham and Leeds and had a better run of games. I do know that. Of course I do. But look, everyone plays everyone over the course of the season, but it matters at what moment as well. At times you play these teams. There is an element of luck involved in it as well. And Manchester City almost messed it up against Leeds, but they got through it. And so who cares? They almost messed it up in the game against Fulham, but they didn't. So who cares? They move on. They took those points. They capitalized on a period whereby Arsenal had the difficult fixtures. That's exactly what they would have been hoping to do. That's exactly what they did. The thing that City are betting on, right, and the reason why this is important, the thing that City are betting on is that come the business end of the season, their know-how and their experience will get them through. Our lack of having done it before will cause nerves, will cause an anxiety, and they are banking on that being the difference. And that's why I say, it's fine that we dropped points. We expected to drop points in some of these games. It was such a hard run of fixtures. Of course we did. But my problem is that we've dropped points because we're dead on our feet. And we're dead on our feet in part because of the injuries and having to overuse certain players. But we're also dead on our feet because we took a decision to prioritize a Champions League game that we could have done with not prioritizing, and it would have been absolutely fine. The question at that point was, does Mikel Arteta value momentum over fresh legs? He chose momentum, but the problem has been over the last couple of weeks that we haven't had the fresh legs to achieve the results that we probably should. And so with hindsight, and I appreciate that it is with hindsight, I think I'm well within my rights to look back and say, was that the right call? Again, much easier for me to be doing that than it is for a manager to make that decision in the moment. But people will point at that, and rightly so. AJ Envoy says Harry's dressed like he's part of the coaching team. Yeah, do you know what? I bought this little Arsenal jacket on the Black Friday sale on Arsenal.com. I was like, oh, I'm not going to buy any more Arsenal merch. Like, I've got enough. That'll do. Christmas is coming up. Let's save a few quid. And then I looked at the Black Friday sale and I was like, click, 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 click. I ended up buying a load of T-shirts as well. But yeah. Okay. What else have we got? Guna Oz says, in the UCL, what matters is top 8. We don't need to be top of the table. As long as we get top 8, losing here and there in the league phase is not a problem. I agree. And again, look, had we been in a position of jeopardy in the Champions League, like had we not picked up enough points up until that point, I'd have understood it completely. But we'd won every game before that. Do you know what I mean? So we were in a great place in terms of the Champions League. And where I'm kicking myself a little bit, and I'm happy to own up to falling into that trap, where I'm kicking myself is that I said that initially. I kept saying, forget the buying game. Make the changes, make the rotations, give it a go, see what you got, see how we get on. But then as the game came around and I went to the press conference and, when you go to these, let me just give you a little bit of insight here, right? When you go to press conferences often, there are games that have that kind of normal feeling about them, like Villa did, like Brentford did. And there are games that have a special feeling about them because of the build-up. Okay, so when you go to a press conference ahead of a big Champions League game, it's not just the usual Arsenal beat in terms of journalists that are there. There are journalists from all over the world that come from afar to be a part of the whole occasion. There's the press room is buzzing. There are people everywhere. There's nowhere to turn. There's open training, which attracts all sorts of media outlets. There's cameras everywhere. You go there and you do fall into the trap of thinking, this is it. Well, maybe in the group stage. It's certainly not the case in the knockout phases because they are big occasions. But you can certainly fall into the trap when a glamour game like this comes around of thinking it's more important than it actually is in the bigger picture. And I fell into that trap. I hold my hands up. And I changed my mind on game day, and I shouldn't have. Because then you'd be taking me a lot more seriously now when I'm sitting here saying that was the wrong decision. AFC 777 says, Harry, would you have given more game time to Norgard, Mars Lewis-Skelly, and Nwaneri? I wouldn't have started Norgard at Chelsea or at Villa because I don't think he's at the same level as the players that we did pick. But my question would be, why did you sign him if you're not going to play him? Like, if you don't think he's a good enough option, and that's not just an opinion that I have, it's clearly an opinion that Mikel has because he doesn't pick him. So I got a lot of crap at the start of the season and during the summer when I said, I'm not sure Christian Norgard is an Arsenal level signing. I remember being on the TalkSport Transfer Insider show on a weeknight. And I remember them cutting a clip of me saying that, it going viral, me getting dog's abuse from every direction you could think of people saying, support the team, get behind the team. It's funny because a week before that, I was Mr. Positive and never said anything negative about the team or the club and was, completely on board with everything they did. Why? Because they were telling me to be. That's what people were saying. Then I had my opinion on Norgard, which I stick by, and I was absolutely torn apart for it. And throughout the course of this season, whenever I've avoided putting Christian Norgard in my 11s, I've had lots of you in the chat going, you're so harsh on Norgard, whatever. Well, Mikel Arteta clearly feels the same way because he does not pick him. And even when Declan Rice is dead on his feet. against the likes of Brentford. He does not pick him. So what does that tell you? I would have probably given him, with hindsight, again, it's with hindsight, I'd have probably given him some minutes against Brentford. He didn't get them. When Declan Rice came off, he didn't bring Norgard on. He brought a forward option on, and he dropped Mikel Merino back into midfield. He'd have rather had a dead on his feet Mikel Merino in the midfield than Christian Norgard. So what does that say? It's not just my opinion that Christian Norgard might not be at the standard required. It's clearly the manager's as well. Miles Lewis-Skelly, he has had some game time recently, in fairness. But I think because of the other defensive injuries, there's been a reluctance to make more changes. And had Gabriel and Saliba been at centre-back, I'd imagine that Miles Lewis-Skelly would have played more. And Nwaneri, absolutely. I'm not saying Nwaneri should be starting games, but he's certainly not any less effective right now than Martin Odegaard is in the final third. So why not? Why not? I agree with that one. And I think Norgard should have played more than he has, but I still wouldn't be starting him in games. Guitar Solo says, Odegaard, just like Rice and Xhaka before him, drops deep to get the ball by design. They are ball carriers, whereas Zubi is the destroyer and distributor. You saw how Zubi was being picked by Spurs. Do you mean picked apart Spurs? Yeah, fine. But my problem was that why were two players trying to, because I'll go back to what I said about the Zubimendi-Odegaard combination. As a result of that, and it was probably in part to Villa looking to shut down Zubimendi, the Spaniard was completely redundant. He was completely redundant on the day. So we were playing with a midfielder less, I guess, in some way you could say, because he didn't have the athleticism, maybe because he was tired, to cover the ground that we needed him to. He did not have the physical presence to dominate in the way that we maybe needed him to up against Camara and Onana, who are quite physical players. He just ended up being redundant on the day. And again, this doesn't mean I wish we never signed him or I don't think he's a good footballer. On the day, it didn't work. On the day, it just did not work. Andy says, I want Arteta to win it for us. I'd love it, but he needs to rotate before it's needed. And that's going to be the crux of it. So we can be as close to 100% in terms of playing our game. I agree. I said right at the start of the season, if you go back to our kind of season preview pod, when we kind of had a good idea of what the squad was looking like. And I think we kind of revisited some of those predictions and thoughts after we signed Eze and once the window was wrapped up with Nkapie as well. I remember saying something to the effect of, our success or failure this season is going to be dependent on whether Mikel Arteta uses the squad right. And I would argue that over the last couple of weeks, he could have done more to protect some of our key players. And if that meant sacrificing a game, the Bayern game was the game to sacrifice. He decided against that, but then he has to own the impact and the effects that has had later down the line. Because it has had an impact. It has had an effect. Kevin says, Villa are better than you realise. That's the problem, but Arsenal are still in the race. Question is, are Villa? Villa are a good side, yeah. And Villa had a really difficult start to the season, which led me to wonder if Unai Emery was even going to be in charge by this point, but he's turned it around. He's done an excellent job. Fair play to him. Tip of the hat to him. Are Villa in the race? Well, points-wise, right now they are, of course. Do Villa have what's necessary to go the distance? I'm not sure. That's where I wonder about them. And I said the same thing about Chelsea a few weeks ago to say this is not Villa or Emery hating. Not at all. The Herd 85 says, do you think this defeat reveals a more worrying pattern in Arsenal's ability to close games out under pressure? Not really, because I think our inability to close games out, the fact that we're conceding the first goal at the moment, that is largely down to the fact that we are without our two centre-halves. Now, let me tell you this. If we don't get at least one of them back in the next few weeks, we're going to have serious problems. I think Bruges, again, a bit like the Bayern game, if we lose, we lose. Wolves coming up next week. That's one that we should be able to win even without those players. There's no excuse to not take all 3 points from Wolves. And the hope is that we'll get at least William Saliba back then, and that Big Gabby will be not too far away. But my God, do we need them. We really, really need them. And we keep talking about depth in defence. And yeah, it's all good putting an Nketiah in alongside a world-class centre-back like Saliba, or a Mosquera alongside a world-class centre-back like Gabriel. To be without both, and now Mosquera as well, we're up shit street when it comes to that back line, and we've got to get players back fast. Let's take some more of your thoughts. Marathon, not a sprint, says AJ. Absolutely. What else have we got? Dystopia says I can feel another second place finish again. Let's not go down that route of doom and gloom and we're not going to win it. Come on. Steve says hindsight is playing a massive part in today's show. It is, and I've openly said that. I think I've said it 4 or 5 times, that I do get to do this with the benefit of hindsight, and I appreciate that. But I can't help the way that I feel, and I'm sorry. Normally, by the next morning, I've calmed down a little bit. By the next morning, I'm a little bit more measured in my analysis. Maybe I'm not that today, but you know why? That one yesterday, it cut deep. It really, really cut deep. This is a good point from Kakani, which backs up the point I'm saying. Don't get doom and gloom over it. Most people don't realize that Man City have to play against Chelsea twice, and Villa have to play Chelsea twice too. Yeah, it's not done by any stretch of the imagination. There's a long way to go, but it's difficult not to feel dejected and worried and concerned after what we saw yesterday. Gunnar says, who do you think we need to rest for the Club Brugge game? I think Rice. I take Rice out. I take Saka out. I take. I was going to say take Timber out, but I don't really know what we can do there unless you play Ben White at centre back. Yeah, maybe play Ben White at centre back. Take Timber out. Calafiori needs a break. Mikel Merino needs a break, but then that doesn't really leave us with that many options because of the injury list right now, and that is the problem. Play one of Eze or Odegaard. Don't play them both. But we'll build up to that game over the course of the next few days, and we'll get into that, of course, in more detail as we get closer. What else have we got? Joe says the timing of the matches came at the wrong time. Chelsea on form and Villa on form at the time will be funny to see the December game. I mean, I get that they came at the wrong time, but that's the hand we were dealt, and we got to cope with that. Jimmy Gilby says Wednesday's game is a Norgard game. If Christian Norgard doesn't start in Bruges, then I'm seriously going to be questioning what the hell was the point in signing him, honestly. So let's see how that goes. Anyway, look, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. That's enough rambling about a game that I just don't want to be reliving over and over again. I got to be honest. As I said, Patreon bit coming out later. It'll be with you by the evening as soon as I get a window. It's all mapped out. I just need a 15-minute window to sit down and record it. And with kids, that is always very difficult to predict when that window exactly is going to come. But I am taking them down to my parents later. So if I don't get it out before the evening, then I'll certainly get it out in the evening, because while I'm at my parents', I'll have the opportunity to sneak off and leave the kids in their care, because my wife's out today. But anyway, thank you so much for bearing with me. Thank you for putting up with all the hindsight stuff. Thank you for being here as always. If I could just ask you one last time, don't forget to leave a like on the video if you're with us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you're listening to us on audio, leave us a review. You know the drill by now. And if you want to go one further, you can support us on Patreon via patreon.com/Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below. Thank you all so much. I'll see you on the next pod. And we've got a good one coming up tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but we've got a good one coming up tomorrow. So really looking forward to that. I'll see you all then. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Come on, you Gunners.